of the challenge we faced was that there were so many different perspectives, but we found not a lot of people were talking to each other. So much of the conversation was really identifying who wasn't doing their job, or who wasn't helping out, who were the impediments, what were the barriers. We're really good at analyzing the deficits and the problems. And part of what we kept trying to do is, got it, and so what do we do? And what do you do in the perch you're sitting in? And how, if we all collectively take that asset-based approach to what we can do within our space, does that get us into a different conversation? How do we incorporate that into something that could be useful? What translates for state policy? And as those of you who are practitioners know, not everything we do at the institutional level translates into policy, because public policy is about scale. And that's the good, bad, and the ugly. What we always know in public policy is you lose the face of the individual you're trying to serve when you're trying to do it at scale. What's effective transfer and what's efficient transfer? And a lot of the policy conversations about how can we be more efficient with what we do. And that's a cost component, and that's not to denigrate the importance of cost, because we all want to be good stewards of the public dollars we have. But often in education, what's efficient is not necessarily effective. And that is, therein lies some of the tension of where you try to translate good work on the ground and good intention, good relationships to scale. So much of the conversation was about transferability of credits and advising, and less about financial aid, the role of faculty beyond teaching, and data sharing. So we tried to include that here to hopefully stimulate some thinking and some things that we think are very doable in the short term, don't necessarily require state policy, but might be facilitated by state policy. So, and as Ira mentioned, we try to approach this as, here's the issue, transferability of credits, here's the strategy, here's our goal for state policy to consider. And then here's some tactics that we heard explicitly from the institutions and the practitioners we were talking to that help you get to the strategy to address the issue. For us, we were looking at a strategy that had all of those in it, that was transparent, that limited accumulation of excess hours, and was consistent from the student perspective. And then in terms of tactics, taking a look at joint training of advisors, financial aid, and admissions and others as ways to keep the student in the center. Because we realize so much of the state policy conversations, we lose the face of that student, but then we forget that if the transfer policy and efforts don't go around how we can ultimately help the student and the institutions play that role, then maybe we're doing a disservice in promoting policies going forward. So we were really trying to think about tactics that did not lose sight of the student, even if we were going to scale. The second area is financial aid. And I will say that we even found little things like the alignment of dates. We found often talking to four-year institutions that students, when they transfer, they get to the back of the line of institutional aid because of timing, when they find out that they've transferred. And most of the institutional aid has already been committed. So certainly there's financial aid for transfer students, but it's already gone. And so the opportunity to say, can we align our dates, our schedules, make sure that we reserve some of our institutional resources at the four-year level to make sure our transfer students have access to some resources, was something that we didn't hear a lot of people talk about. Most didn't deny that that was a good idea, but that wasn't the focus of a lot of conversations. But sometimes we have to go take a step back and see, even with what we're doing, can we do things like aligning our dates for notification, for eligibility? Doesn't mean that we necessarily need to change how much resource we put into it, but the eligibility component is important. But fundamentally, are we making sure that we're not, we're giving the opportunities to our transfer students as they need it for financial aid? The third is faculty involvement. How do we make sure that faculty who touch students most directly, even more than us as administrators, policy folks, have the wherewithal and the ability to also serve as mentors and advisors to those students? And then last, data sharing. We saw some institutional pairings where there's a lot of commitment, focus, and good data sharing. But I wouldn't say it's not always effective, and it's not always easy. Maybe some of it's based on relationships. Some of it is as clear as having data systems that can talk to each other, that are on similar platforms. But it's also the comfort level we have with sharing information about our students with those that are our partners and feeders, receivers of or feeders to institutions. And thinking through that a little bit more clearly can facilitate some of the transfer policies that we're trying to do well by our students.